Chad HD Show News Talk KFYO. Thank you very much for tuning in today. We go to the phones. Republican strategist Matt Mackowiak joining us this morning. Matt, good morning. How are you today, my friend?
I'm doing great, Chad. How about you?
Doing great. Let's talk about some statewide stuff first. You've got some on the left who are trying to overturn mail-in ballot, I guess, restrictions. Is that correct?
Yeah, they basically want to take state law and, which now only allows you to vote by mail if you're over 65 or if you are can prove you'll be out of the country on Election Day, and basically make it available to anyone. And what the Attorney General has said to counties is, you can't, county election officers can't change state law with an executive order, and so this is working its way through the courts. I think the lower court ruled in favor of the plaintiffs, but that I think has been stayed, and now it's at the Court of Appeals level. So this is working its way through, but we're going to know pretty soon because you have the runoffs on July 14th with early voting now beginning June 29th with Governor Abbott's announcement last night. So they need to decide here probably in the next 7 to 10 days in order to understand whether there are going to be more mail ballots available or not.
And we were visiting with the RNC co-chair Tommy Hicks earlier, and the way this sounds is that this is going on all throughout the country. That this is a big push by the Democrats.
Yeah, there's no question, and it's interesting because there are different opinions about whether it's even proven that expanded mail ballots would give one party an advantage or not. I think clearly the Democrats think there's to be an advantage, and if you look in states like California and North Carolina, where they have ballot harvesting, certainly that has made a difference in terms of people going out and literally collecting and even filling out mail ballots. To me, I don't really think expanded mail ballots are necessary, given that we have 2 weeks of early voting, including a weekend. I mean, I vote early pretty much every cycle on the first day or two. There's never anyone there. You can imagine these counties are going to be looking at locations that are much larger so we can socially distance. So we'll see kind of, where this goes. But yes, the Democrats believe that we need to, that the average voter has a credible fear of turning out. We've really not seen evidence of that. I mean, places where they have had voting, including Wisconsin, they had pretty good turnout and actually very limited problems. So we'll see what the courts decide.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a couple of articles out this week. I think it was either last week you and I talked about this, or maybe the week before, with Biden's possible VP pick. It seems to be this week the big push is for Kamala Harris or Elizabeth Warren as the top two potential candidates.
Yeah, and look, I guess there will be, kind of ebbs and flows on different people. I think the problem with Kamala is that she got into a pretty high-profile, battle with Biden on the debate stage over this ridiculous busing issue, and I think that is something that will get kind of played, back over and over and over again if she's ultimately the candidate. There is no doubt progressives want not just a female candidate, but a female candidate of color, and Harris is probably the only one that's really a credible VP choice at this stage. For Biden. So, California's not in play. Harris probably would, be very helpful with African-American voters, although Biden presumably has good standing there to begin with. Elizabeth Warren would be an interesting choice because it would be, an unmistakable signal to progressives that, she's going to have an influential position. She can move the platform to the left, move Biden to the left, and really provide that kind of outreach. I really don't think Biden will choose Warren unless he feels desperate. He doesn't want pressure on his left, certainly not in his own White House. And Warren is just not going to agree with a lot of what Biden's going to want to do. So that's really going to be a sign that they really feel that they have not brought progressives on board. It's really probably would be more of a sign of weakness. That would be less about trying to win the general election and more about trying to assuage progressives.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt, when you look at President Trump right now, what would you say today his reelection chances are? Yeah,
look, I've been saying from the beginning over the last 6 months, 50. I would say 50-50. If you look at the betting odds, I think he's generally narrowly favored to be reelected compared to not. I would say as of right now, his odds have gone down a little bit. If you look at where senior citizens are moving away from Trump, that's a problem. They're the most reliable voter subgroup. The news on coronavirus is not good. It's certainly not as bad as it could have been in terms of number of deaths. We're quite a bit lower than some of the projections, around 1 million or 2 million people. But we're going to have at least 100,000 people probably die this year, maybe even quite a bit more than that. The economy is still very, very weak, which takes away the strongest argument he had. Now, look, I don't think Biden's a strong candidate. He's hiding in his basement. He may stay there the rest of the year. Who knows? And the polling certainly shows that Biden has an advantage. That said, look, this election comes down to Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Those 3 states alone, I suspect. And really, the case that Trump can make is, I built the strongest economy we've ever had. Who do you trust to bring us back economically? And I just think that's a winning message for him. And if by the third quarter of the year we start to see growth again, people start to get rehired, we're getting back to a sort of a new normal. I think we may have some positive feeling around the country that may make this a much better political environment for him. There are still some huge risks. I mean, we could have a second wave in the fall or the winter. We could have layoffs by states and cities right around the election, which could put additional pressure, political pressure on him. I mean, there are huge risks out there. It's a really, really uncertain political time, and so it's hard to make predictions. I think he's got certainly has a chance to win, but it's a narrow path, and he's got to have some good things happen over the next few months.
Matt, when and you talk about this is just an unusual political time because with the coronavirus, obviously you've got Congress looking at another round of stimulus money, whoever that may be intended for, states, cities, people. You have Republicans who never in their life would have voted for a $2 trillion stimulus package. There was an article yesterday that I have to admit I rolled my eyes a little bit at, which where Republicans are worried about the deficit, and I'm sitting there going, now you guys are worried about it. I mean, is there a risk that Republicans run if they don't embrace more federal spending right now, just because they're perceived as the federal government as the ones who broke the economy?
Yeah, look, it is an extremely difficult time. I think everyone wants to take smart steps to save the economy, to prevent us from going into another Great Depression. And what's so unusual about this is really not a structural recession that we're in. It's a man-made recession, and it's temporary. One of the encouraging signs in the April jobs report is that 18.1 million of the 20.5 million people who said they lost jobs in April said they believed their job loss was temporary and that they would be rehired by their employer within 6 months. So I think that shows, that we can bounce back, half or 2/3 of what we've lost over the next 6 months if we take smart steps. One of the reasons why you're seeing even some hardcore conservatives vote for these massive spending bills is that they are overwhelmingly popular. I talked to a Republican pollster last week that told me he's never seen a piece of legislation more popular than the CARES Act. I think it was 85 or 90% support across the country, across every demographic you can possibly imagine. You simply do not vote against a bill that has 85 or 90% support across the country. But look, you raise good questions about and issues about the deficit and the debt. I mean, we have a bill coming due. Our interest payments are going up. Our debt to GDP ratio is getting really scary. We're going to have inflation, I imagine, in the next 6 months or 9 months, well above the 2% target the Fed generally looks at. It's probably not a bad time to buy things like Bitcoin and gold because we are eventually going to be paying the bill for all of this spending, and there really doesn't seem to be much appetite for spending cuts or entitlement reforms. Democrats don't want to do entitlement reforms, certainly don't want to do spending cuts, and even the president has opposed entitlement reforms, which we would need to become more solvent.
Yeah. All right, Matt, tell folks how they can sign up for your morning newsletter and also what your latest podcast, the topic of your latest podcast.
Yeah, the newsletter is called Must Read Texas. I know you, along with 3,000 Texans, get it every weekday morning. We take all the top news from around the state, put it in one clean, easy-to-read email, and send it out by 9 a.m. You can sign up for a free one-week trial at mustreadtexas.com. The podcast is called Mac on Politics. It's available in the iTunes Store, on Google Play, on Stitcher, and on Spotify. Most recent episode is with Congressman Michael McCall, the top Republican on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. We talk all about what he has learned about China's responsibility for the coronavirus and for hiding critical information related to that. So do check that episode out.
Very good. Matt, thank you very much. Stay healthy, and we'll talk to you next week.
Take care.
That's Matt Mackowiak here on the Chad Hasty Show, News Talk KFYO.